Hiya, welcome back to Scott Goes Pop. My name's James Kelly. Very long-term readers of the blog will remember that about 3 years ago, well, 2 or 3 years ago, I used to have to continually debunk a fraudulent graph that our old friend Stu used to constantly post on Wings Over Scotland, which purported to show that support for independence had been stuck for years and years, since like 2015 or 2016, on I think 47% of the vote, which was like a load of nonsense. There's been a lot of changes over that period of time. And if you actually looked at the small print underneath Stuart's graph, you could see exactly how he had pulled this fraudulent effect off. He had cherry picked like about 4 or 5 polls, or 5 or 6 at most, out of the hundreds that had been conducted over that period. And of course, he cherry picked the ones that suited his case. So because I had to debunk this so often, it got to the point where I was trying to find new and more ways of debunking it more comprehensively. So what I eventually ended up doing was I simply calculated the polling average for each calendar year of all the polls that have been conducted on independence. And needless to say, it produced a very different picture from the one that Stuart was suggesting. And it was really interesting. Prior to 2020, there had never been a year in which the average of polls showed yes above 50%. However, in 2016, there was a bit of a peak for yes, which was caused by the backlash against the Leave vote in the EU referendum. Then in 2017, there was a dip in support for yes, which is not surprising when you remember what happened in the general election of that year. And then there was a sort of gradual increase again in 2018 and again in 2019. And then suddenly, of course, you get this huge increase in 2020. Yes, support not only surges past 50% for the first time in a yearly average, it's actually above 53%. And the reason for that was because people were so enthusiastic about Nicola Sturgeon's handling of the COVID crisis. As I said at the time, this was the first time since probably 1745, since the Jacobite uprising, that Scotland had effectively functioned to some extent as an independent country. And Nicola Sturgeon embodied that, and people liked what they saw, and they wanted more for that period of time anyway. Unfortunately, in 2021, that effect sort of abated a bit, and the average for 2021 showed yes, just fractionally below 50%. Same thing happened again in 2022, which means that 2025 could be only the second year in history in which there has been or there will have been a yes average in all of the polls that were conducted in that year. And the reason I say that is because we are in mid-November. There is only about 6 weeks in the year to go, about a month and a half. And I have calculated the yearly average for all of the independence polls that have been conducted in 2025 so far. And there is a yes majority at this stage. Now, let me explain how I've produced this average, because obviously the first thing you have to do is make sure you've got a comprehensive list of all of the independence polls that have been conducted this year. So the first thing I did was I looked at the list on Wikipedia. Now, I know some people have this sort of knee-jerk reaction to any mention of Wikipedia because they think it's got a reputation for being unreliable. But in fact, because it's a collaborative website, there's actually a lesser risk of polls being missed than it would be if this was a list compiled by a single journalist, for example. So I would actually be more inclined to trust a Wikipedia list. But unfortunately, when I looked at the Wikipedia list, I noticed almost straight away that there was one poll missing, because I knew there were three YouGov polls as part of the Scottish Opinion Monitor series this year, and there were only two on the Wikipedia list. Now, in a way, it's understandable that that one poll was missing, because of all the polls that are ever conducted on independence, the Scottish Opinion Monitor series is the one that comes out with the least fanfare, with the least, hardly anybody in the mainstream media ever seems to notice it. So it's entirely understandable that if a poll was going to be missed, it would be one of those polls. But of course, there is the worry that if the Wikipedia list managed to miss one poll that might have missed more. So I've double checked on John Curtis's website what Scotland thinks to make sure there are no polls listed there that were not listed in Wikipedia. And apart from that one poll that I found, that there are no other missing polls. So I am relatively confident that I have got an exhaustive list of all the independence polls that were conducted this year, at least the credible polls. I'm not interested in junk polls from cowboy firms, the sort of polls that KC would like us to take more seriously. But if I've missed anything, by all means, let me know. But I don't think I have. So there seems to be 15 polls this year on independence conducted by firms that are affiliated to the British Polling Council. Of those 15, 8 show a yes lead and 7 show a no lead. And the average will therefore be in line with your expectations and showing a small yes advantage. The first average I worked out was leaving the don't knows in, without excluding the don't knows. And on that basis, yes average out at 45.2% of the vote and no average out at 44.4% of the vote. And if you then exclude the don't knows, you're left with yes on 50.4% and no on 49.6%. So that's not as big a lead as yes had in the average for 2020, but nevertheless it is a lead, and this would be, if things stay the same, only the second calendar year in which we have had a yes majority. And obviously, with only a month and a half to go, there is a chance that there will be no more polls, in which case that would just remain the case and we would have that yes majority in the average. If there is one more poll, then the only way that no would take the lead in the average would be if there is a big, like, double-digit lead for no in that poll. Obviously, if there's more than one poll still to come, then all bets are off. But it's looking good at the moment for a yes majority in the yearly average for 2025. Now, I must add a note to this, which is that the other problem with the Wikipedia list is that someone is, well, maybe I shouldn't put it like this, but it looks like someone has been mucking around with the YouGov figures in that table. There's a little note attached to each YouGov poll saying the figures have been manually recalculated. And so I actually initially calculated the average with what are basically the wrong figures. And so I had to go back and recalculate them using the figures that actually appear in the YouGov datasets. What on earth the justification would be for actually changing the numbers that were published by the polling company that conducted the polls is beyond me. There must be some sort of explanation there, but I don't know what it would be. But anyway, I'm confident that the correct thing to do is to obviously use the numbers that YouGov actually published. And that actually had a slightly favourable effect for the yes vote. It's very slightly increased the yes vote in the average. The other thing to say is that I am reasonably confident that this very slender yes majority in the average is probably an underestimate. And the reason I say that is because there's a sort of division in these 15 polls. Some of them are, conducted by firms like Ipsos and Find Out Now, which do not weight their results by recalled vote from the 2014 referendum. And those two firms consistently show yes majorities, whereas a firm like YouGov do weight by 2014 recalled vote, and they tend to produce no majorities. So assuming, and I don't think this is really a particularly controversial assumption at this stage, that there is a risk of false recall after 11 years since the referendum took place, and that what YouGov and a few other firms are doing is therefore highly suspect, and they really shouldn't be doing it. And if they weren't doing it, they would be showing a higher yes vote. I think it's not unreasonable to say that the yes lead should be higher, and probably is higher on the ground, although of course we can't be 100% sure about that, and there may be other methodological errors that are going on. But although it's frustrating that the yes vote is perhaps artificially low in the average and also in many individual polls, the important thing psychologically is that there is likely to be a Yes, majority in the yearly average by the end of the year. And if that is the case, I think we should make some noise about it, don't you? Anyway, that's it for now. If you're enjoying these videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel because I am trying to get to the all-important threshold of 1,000 subscribers before too long. I'm over 800 at the moment, so I am gradually getting there. Anyway, I'm delighted to have been able to bring you a good news story for the independence movement in this video. But hey, Stu, what's the real story?